Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Find a living in fisheries. The UAS Fisheries Technology Program offers online study from anywhere in Alaska, plus labs and workshops in many Alaska towns.
Is most likely a chum.
Find your living without leaving where you are. Fisheries Technology from UAS.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 12th of April on this Wednesday. We encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information no matter what part of Alaska you're in. As always, you can call the Alaska Weather Information Line at 1-800-472-0391. Find us online at weather.gov/Alaska, and once you click on that site, you'll go to your local weather office that serves your part of Alaska, whether that's the Fairbanks Weather Forecast Office, the Anchorage Weather Forecast Office, or Juneau, serving all of the Panhandle. If you have a question about what you're seeing there, we love to get your emails, nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov, or if you want to spell out my name, david.snider@noaa.gov. I'll certainly get your email that way as well. Ask a question, anything you see about Alaska, if it's a weather question, if it's a picture you'd like to share and see here on Alaska Weather of your village, your community, we'd love to share that with folks. And of course, if you can't find what you're looking for in the weather forecast or some of the tools right here on the TV show, please let us know. We're always happy to help. Let's take a look around Alaska. Why not, right? It was a beautiful day in many locations across southeast, south central, and all the way up into the North Slope and the Brooks Range out west. A few more clouds, but we're going to stick to places that you could tell were either really warm or really sunny today. So why not Kodiak? You know, so many times we hear how rat nasty the weather is in Kodiak, and it just wasn't so today. I would have loved to have walked down the street in Kodiak today. Avcams.faa.gov is a place to get this from our FAA partners there, and of course many of you aviation folks use this every day to check out the weather in Kodiak and many other places. Today, 65 beautiful degrees in Kodiak. Here's a look at Klawock. Okay, a few clouds, doesn't meet the sunny criteria entirely, but you can tell it was a nice day there. How warm was it in Klawock? Oh, let's see, 65 warm degrees in sunny Klawock today. So a gorgeous day, and apparently the warmest place in the state as far as we can tell. Here's a look at Nenana, and anybody around Nenana and pretty much all of Alaska knows what this is. This is the Nenana tripod. I don't think this is rotting ice, so if you've got a little bit of a startle there, I think they just kind of scraped it off to kind of get the tripod set up. The ice is still intact in Nenana, but of course we're watching, because in Nenana today it was 48 degrees. So you know things are starting to change there, as they have in many other locations further south. Now, for those of you worried about breakup, it sounds like most areas, as far as any big breakup news goes, should have a normal breakup. It might be a couple days early where you are, but nothing too substantial. This from the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center. So in not too long, we'll have that breakup map coming back to the TV weather show. So stay tuned. That's probably not too far off. Let's go a little bit further north under the ridge of high pressure. Beautiful ball of flaming gas there. Looking at Arctic Village, avcams.faa.gov. A little bit of snow still on the ground. How warm was it in Arctic Village today? 36 degrees for the high temperature, above freezing. A beautiful day and a beautiful sight there. So hopefully, wherever you are in Alaska, I hope you enjoyed your day. It has been a beauty here in Anchorage. Here's a look at the weather picture. High pressure is in charge of most of the interior, right? And you can see the effects of that during the day. Whew, just took an eraser to the clouds, just out of here, go away. A strong southerly flow, though, across the eastern Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula, up the west coast, off the Chukchi coast. All of this has warm and wet air in it, enough so that we saw rain today around St. Paul. The risk of freezing rain and winter weather in St. Lawrence Island has minimized anyway. It's probably still present, but The weather warning we were talking about last night, that's gone, so you don't have to worry about the intense winter mix or freezing rain potential that it looked like was possible last night, so there's good news there. Low pressure still dawdling out here in the central and eastern Gulf, but enough so that we're getting that offshore wind blowing through southeastern Alaska. So good news, you will see a little more cloud cover, it looks like, blowing off the mountains in the next 24 hours, but it still looks very warm in southeast. For the central and western chain, you can see another wave of weather lining up out to the west that has to wait for the current wave to get out of the way. Across the north slope, steady easterly winds, high pressure is well to your north, and that's keeping that easterly flow pulling into this very strong southerly flow. So that will probably stay persistently breezy, if not gusty at times. And of course, as moisture accumulates along the coast, you may see areas of fog and possibly some blowing snow. So weather's not quite as nice up in the north slope, but for many in the interior, all the way from the Alcan border west to, well, mainly the YK Delta before you get clouds, south central. And again, Kodiak Island, I hope you enjoyed the sun today. Southeast, again, just a beautiful, beautiful day, as it was foretold. Out across the west and north of Adak, you can see that spiraling ball here. That is the center of low pressure out across the southern Bering Sea, filling in as we go, up to 999 millibars now. Pockets of rain and snow across the southern Alaska Peninsula, the eastern Aleutians, a few waves of rainfall across St. Paul and St. George, but liquid it is. And around St. Lawrence Island, also reporting some rainfall there. You probably had some mixing with snow throughout the day in Gamble and Sabunga, no question about it. And then you can see the effects of high pressure pushing air out into the Gulf. Look at that, clearing away the clouds for Kodiak. There's still some snow there across the mountains and across the Chugach, Wrangell, St. Elias, all the way into southeast. A beautiful day as that wet air is just vacuumed out to sea and it vanishes as it descends over the higher terrain. Here's a look at tonight. Not a big movement at all across the northern Bering with that frontal boundary. A 999 millibar low now west of the Gulf of Anadyr. High pressure is trying to gain some ground across the western Gulf. All part of the system that we have up here across the Arctic Ocean and the Brooks Range. Watch for some pockets of fog and maybe a few snow showers as that air is moving up over the eastern Brooks Range, but it doesn't look to be very widespread at all. Across the Yukon, a chance for some snow showers there as the disturbance is kind of shaping up here. We'll see that sneak further south and eastward, so we don't have to really worry about this sliding into south central or southeast or the eastern sections of the interior. Once again, a generally clear night with a trough of low pressure just offshore. As we get into Thursday, don't be surprised with a few clouds across southeast, but still looking at our offshore flow, so anything that you see will probably be short-lived. Across the north slope, periods of blowing snow off the Chukchi coast. Most of the clouds, again, won't contain a whole lot more than just clouds. Will be breezy, though. And around the Wrangell St. Elias, a few areas of snow showers trying to work their way into the Copper River Basin. This should be pretty isolated. Out across the west, high pressure sitting south and west of Kodiak Island. That's going to chew up this disturbance that's moving in from the west. The focus will be a little bit further north from places like Amanak all the way out into the outer portions of Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, and the Chukchi coast, again with gusty east and southeasterly winds at times, and then poor visibility thanks to any snow that may be blowing around, but nothing that's reaching our warning criteria at this point, so good news there. And the next weather disturbance moves into the central chain, and once again we're lining up some gusty winds. Tonight, in fact, gales fairly widespread across the Bering. As we look at Friday, you can see the advance of that next wave that makes it almost to Nikolsky there, east of Atka. A 990 millibar low with another one right behind it at 983. With that cooler weather wrapped around those systems, you can expect some passing waves of rain and snow if they make it out toward the Pribilofs or St. Lawrence Island, but it looks like a lot of that really colder air is going to stay well to the north. You can see the pressure gradient again starting to stack up across the north slope. You know what that means for Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse and Kaktovik. We're going to need to watch for periods of blowing snow, assuming you still have enough of that that's transportable or able to be blown around. That's probably getting fewer and further between as more of that snow is being blown away. So good news there if you don't have snow on the ground, because it does look like the winds are going to be moving around. Some pockets of light snow will develop as a front drops south across the Arctic Ocean into the Arctic coast and then out across the eastern part of the interior in the eastern Brooks Range. This should probably wait until later in the day on Friday. So Arctic Village may get that first, and then a little bit further south toward Fort Yukon, and then maybe Eagle as the day goes on. But this really looks to be limited to mainly eastern villages and probably well east of Fairbanks. I'm not even sure Fairbanks has that in the forecast at this point for Fairbanks proper in the middle Tanana Valley. But something you may see in the region and on the radar if you're keeping track of that. As we look at southeast, again, the clouds are trying to fill back in. The orientation of the trough of low pressure changes just a little bit, so that's going to affect how that all plays out for Friday. But the good news is you probably have at least another 24 hours of a generally clear sky in southeast. And look at what that did for you today. 50s and 60s all the way from Haines and Skagway to the capital city to Sitka to Klawock. That was up to about 65 at one point today. Mid-50s across the water there in Haida Gwaii, 57 in Hyder. 46 in Middleton Island, but much warmer inside of Prince William Sound. Almost 60 at Cordova around the 3 o'clock hour. 50 in Anchorage, 53 for Homer and Seward, 52 in Kenai. Starting to feel like summertime. 50 in Fairbanks, upper 40s around Fort Greely and Fort Greely and Healy. Eagle was 47 around Tok and Northway. Temps were close to 50 degrees. 41 in Fort Yukon. Tanana Tanana, I should say, was closer to 50 degrees. 41 around Fort Yukon. 27 for AKwx Pass. Teens and 20s for most of the Arctic coast as you get around Point Hope, lower 40s there. 34 for Kivalina, 35 in Kotzebue, 37 in Shishmaref, 34 in Nome, Wales, 36, about the same there as St. Lawrence Island today. Just about 50 in McGrath, close to that in Bethel, as well as areas around Russian Mission and all the way out toward Grayling, Lake Iliamna, close to 50 today. 40s and 50s, and cooler weather around the Alaska Peninsula. Why? Clouds and a steady stream of wind and moisture coming up over you. Periods of rain and snow there today on Alaska and Dutch Harbor, 44, and 30s and 40s for the central and western chain. St. Paul and St. George, close to 40 today. Down to 33 there tonight. Temps below freezing for Bristol Bay, at freezing in Kodiak, 20s and 30s for most of the YK Delta, 30 in Nome, 11 in Barrow, down into the teens and 20s for the middle Tanana Valley and the upper part of the valley. Probably very close to freezing, if not a little bit below for south central tonight. Southeast in the lower to mid 30s with highs tomorrow. Back in the 50s for most of the southern interior, southeast, the North Slope, teens and 20s, Nome 36, Bristol Bay in the 40s, and the Alaska Peninsula also in the lower to mid 40s. It will probably be a nice day where you are, exceptions the west coast. IFR conditions moving through Nunivak Island, St. Lawrence Island, and the North Slope tomorrow. Southeast looking good. Out west, some changes there as the front moves eastward. You'll see MVFR developing from the Alaska Peninsula through Bristol Bay and the YK Delta, Nome, and parts of Kotzebue Sound, and IFR expanding across the North Slope, southeast, south central, and the interior still looking good. Here's your pass conditions. AKwx Pass, VFR, you can do this with me, all the way around Adigan Pass, Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, Rainy Pass, and Windy Pass looking really good all day long tomorrow. Isabel Pass, beautiful day in Mentasta Pass. VFR conditions. Tanita Pass, VFR expected there today and tomorrow, and Fort Portage Pass, VFR, Chilkoot and White Pass, A-OK. Freezing levels show that steep rise in warm air all the way across the west coast. Levels there into the Chukchi Sea as high as 2,000 feet, higher than 4,000 feet across the southern parts of the Bering there, and the warm air also expanding its reach across the northern and eastern and even northwestern parts of the Gulf. Also some changes out in the west, all because of that south to north oriented jet stream. Icing potential is limited to that path above 3,000 to 4,000 feet there. That's going to keep it over the Pribilof, St. Matthew, the Gulf of Anadyr, and southward toward Adak and Atka, and generally west of the peninsula. Out over the Gulf, again, a little hit and miss patch there, but you'll probably steer clear of that anyway. The interior, the east, and south central looking pretty good at this point. Here's the jet stream. No wonder it's warm across most of Alaska right now. A blocking ridge of high pressure set up across the region, a steady south flow. The main superhighway of weather is well to the south tomorrow, and we will still have similar conditions to what we experienced today. So no big changes there. At 9,000 feet, you can see our steady flow here, anywhere from 20 to 35 knots or so across most of the Aleutians and the west coast. The interior, more of a northerly flow, still fairly light, 5 to as high as 15 knots most areas, and an offshore breeze wrapping around low pressure across the Pacific Northwest, 15 to 20 knots most areas for southeast. For 3,000 feet, north and easterly flow continues across the eastern Gulf. Light northerlies really put on the brakes around Kodiak Island thanks to high pressure over Bristol Bay, and that's where we get back into our steady southerlies, 15 to as high as 40 knots across the chain. Light winds for the interior, about 5 to 15 there. And you can see a light northerly flow across the central and eastern Beaufort seacoast there, thanks to low pressure parked offshore. So turbulence, we're going to watch areas around Point Hope, the western end of the Seward Peninsula, including areas around Nome, St. Lawrence Island, Sand Point, and just west all the way out toward Cold Bay and False Pass. And for the central and western chain, Watch for some pockets of outflow winds around Yakutat and Icy Cape and Cape Fairweather, and just outside of Cross Sound. All areas here below 4,000 feet for a little bit of chop and maybe occasional moderate. That's a look at your aviation forecast. Go fly tomorrow. It looks great, probably, where you are. We'll take a look at the marine weather here in just a few minutes. Stay tuned.
Next, you will approach Berners Bay, Bridget Point, and Echo Cove, which will be to the right. After passing Berners Bay, Point St. Mary's is the next reporting point. Keep in mind, Berners Bay is important as a reporting point. Most poor weather conditions for the Lynn Canal are generated in this area. Adiabatic winds descending from the ice fields to the north of Berners Bay can create fog or turbulence depending on the temperature dew point spread. Tour operators will normally report Sherman Point on the other side of Berners Bay and Eldred Rock Lighthouse. Sullivan Island is to the left. In the vicinity of Eldred Rock, pilots frequently cross the Lynn Canal towards Sullivan Island to fly up the Chilkat Inlet to Haines. When crossing the canal, remain within gliding distance of shore. Haines Peninsula separates Chilkat Inlet to the left from Chilkoot Inlet to the right. There is a landing strip at Glacier Point at the foot of Davidson Glacier that can be used in an emergency. Davidson Glacier, which will be off to the left, is a route used by the tour operators into Glacier Bay. It is also a reporting point that has a lot of traffic during the summer months. Continuing towards Haines, Rainbow Glacier, which is a hanging glacier to the left of your flight path, is also used as a reporting point. Alexander Island is just abeam Davidson Glacier and Pyramid Rock, just before reaching the city of Haines. Both are reporting points for entering the traffic pattern at Haines. Haines has quite a bit of traffic in the summer months. Tour operators pick up tourists for glacier tours. Haines has one of the few roads in southeast Alaska that connects to the Alcan Highway. The Alaska Marine Highway, or ferry, stops in Haines with potential passengers from outlying areas. Operators based in Haines serve the local population and ferry passengers with transportation in southeast Alaska to areas where there are no roads or ferry service. Weather can change rapidly, and high winds blowing across the runway are common. There is a bluff to the northwest of runway 826. There are strong crosswinds due to wind descending over the bluff. Moose and bear are known to be in the vicinity of the runway, so be cautious on the approach. There is transient parking available, but services are limited. Fuel can be obtained by calling the phone number listed at the pumps. When departing Haines, avoid flying over the town at low altitudes. The people of Haines are very noise sensitive. 135 operators will be reporting the Davidson Glacier descending inbound to Haines. Be especially aware of traffic around you as you climb out. Returning to the Lynn Canal, you will again pass Pyramid Rock, Alexander Island, Davidson Glacier, and Rainbow Glacier. As you move out of Chilkat Inlet into the Lynn Canal, your next set of checkpoints will be Sullivan Island and Eldred Rock Lighthouse. As you continue toward Juneau, you will see Berners Bay, Benjamin Island, Eagle Beach, Tea Harbor, and finally, Lena Point. It is important that you know where the reporting points are located in order to spot reporting traffic in the Lynn Canal. Alaska Airlines VFR descent is across Barlow Cove to the Cut or Funter Bay to South Tip. Be alert to traffic arriving from the southwest. Lena Point is the first reporting point into the Juneau Airport. The approach into Juneau requires vigilance because many aircraft will be approaching and departing the Juneau Airport and Float Pond area. Subsequent reporting points when approaching for runway 08 are Coghlan Island, then Battleship Island, if requested, the Cut, South Tip, and final approach. If you are interested in traveling to other locations in Alaska, please view the appropriate videotape.
With a warm southerly flow across the eastern Bering Sea and the Pribilofs, this is really no surprise, right? The ice edge is moving very quickly to the north now. We still have strips of ice that are in the vicinity of St. Paul. St. George seems to be a little bit more in the clear than yesterday. The high concentration ice is really starting to be kind of all patchwork there. Above 80% is what you're seeing in white. Blue is 80% and lower, so we still have strips and some smaller pockets of higher concentration ice in Bristol Bay, but even that is changing very quickly. And we're going to start watching for polynyas generally north of islands. So Nunivak Island could start to see a polynya develop here. North of St. Lawrence Island, watch for some changes there as well, as all of this will be on the move and ice conditions will be changing. So do be careful out there. Check weather.gov/anchorage/ice anytime for the start of your briefing procedure there. And across Cook Inlet, of course, most of the ice almost gone. So big changes all the way around. Here's a look at the weather in southeast. Northerly offshore type winds expected for you tomorrow. Looks like a gorgeous day, a bit breezy maybe in some places on the water, but seas ranging from 3 to 5 feet on the inside and 5 to 7 feet across the outer coast. Winds typically from the north and east 20 to 25 for Thursday. For Friday, winds diminish south of Sitka along the outer coast. Seas still holding 5 to 6 feet there. Northerlies from the Lynn Canal all the way through Stevens Passage and a southeasterly flow in the Clarence Strait, 20 knots with a 4-foot sea on Friday. For South Central, northerlies in Cook Inlet anywhere from 10 to 20 knots, 2 to 5-foot seas there west of the Barrens. A light and variable flow in Shelikof Strait should be nice there tomorrow. And then northerlies in Prince William Sound outside into the northern Gulf, 15 to 25, seas 4 to 6 feet for Friday. Light winds across the northern Gulf, and that continues all the way into the west where winds pick up a little bit more around the north, about 15 knots there, 3 to 6-foot seas. And a north and easterly flow coming down Cook Inlet, still holding at 10 to 15. Seas inside Shelikof Strait, only 2 feet again on Friday. Are you kidding? That looks wonderful. Easterlies inside of Bristol Bay, 10 knots with a 2-foot sea. Southeasterlies across the southern end of the Alaska Peninsula, 15 to 20, and 5 feet across the southern Bering Sea coast, 11-foot seas as you get into the Pacific coast there, 7-foot seas up toward Kodiak Island with a westerly wind. Northwesterly winds continue there on Friday. Light winds inside of Bristol Bay, and our southeasterly flow continues across the peninsula with 20 knots and 4-foot seas on the Bering Sea coast, 7-foot seas along the Pacific. For the Aleutians, a broad southerly flow will be much stronger here, but really not so bad. 30 to 35, looking for 11 to 13-foot seas west of Kiska. South and westerly flows south of Nikolsky and east of Adak. Looking for a light and variable flow south of Nikolsky to Unalaska, and southwesterlies on the northern side of the island at 15 knots. As we get into Friday, winds still not so bad. 30 to 35, all areas there. Looking at 8 to 12-foot seas across the central and eastern chain on the Bering Sea side. 12 to 14-foot seas across the Pacific side, and south and westerlies across the western chain. Seas there out around Attu and Kiska could be up to 20 feet there, so watch that. 30-knot winds from the southwest are expected. Across the west coast, south and easterly winds 20 to 25, 6-foot seas for St. Lawrence, 7 around St. Matthew, and 8-foot seas for St. Paul and St. George, with 5-foot seas outside of the Kuskokwim Delta. Those diminish to 3 feet as you get into Friday. A steady southeast flow for the entire region, 11-foot seas for St. Paul and St. George, up to 12 for St. Matthew on a 35-knot wind, 20 knots around St. Lawrence Island, still blowing in warm air your way. Remember the winds across the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast, not too bad here on Thursday, but again, we're watching high pressure kind of pack in that pressure gradient, so don't be surprised to see these come up. South and easterly winds for the Chukchi Coast, 20 to 25. As we get into Friday, there they are, 20 to 25 there across the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast. And again, blowing east, and there's going to be moisture there. Don't be surprised to see clouds and even some fog set in. 20 to 30 knots across the Chukchi Coast, and 20 knots for the Kotzebue Sound region from the southeast for Friday. Let's recap the weather where you are. It's going to be nice. That's probably going to work for just about all areas of Alaska, so we're focused on the places that won't have all of the nice. That'll be generally the west coast. If you're on the YK Delta coast, the Alaska Peninsula, maybe up toward certainly the Pribilofs and St. Lawrence Island, you're going to be under that steady south flow, and that means you're going to get periods of rain, wind, and possibly snow the further north you go. Now for southeast, south central, parts of southwest, the interior, and maybe at times the north slope, conditions will be fairly nice. Look for a generally clear sky there. Another wave of weather moves across the Aleutians as we head into Friday, continuing the strong southerly flow up the west coast as we head toward the end of the weekend, early next weekend. That's your Alaska weather. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.